Okay, so today we're tackling a really tough question, one that has, echoed throughout history and really challenged people of every possible belief.
So where do we even start? Well, we have to look head-on at this really uncomfortable history. We're talking about atrocities that weren't done in the dark, but right out in the open, often with the full blessing of the public and even religious leaders.
So our first section, a history of holy terror, from pulpits and with blessings. And the thing is, this is not some new or rare problem. It's a pattern that's woven deep into our shared story.
I mean, just think about it. From the slave trade to apartheid, from inquisitors torturing people for their own good, to colonizers destroying entire cultures, so often the people doing these horrific things were devout. They genuinely believed God was on their side, that he approved of what they were doing.
When you see this pattern over and over again, it forces you to ask a really serious question. Does claiming to speak for God lead to a kind of moral blindness? A place where you can justify absolutely anything?
And that brings us to our second section, the safeguard God built, an unexpected answer. Because here is where things get really interesting. We're going to look at a fascinating answer that comes from a Quranic perspective.
The core idea here is that this wasn't some unforeseen bug in the system. The argument is that God actually anticipated this exact danger, and the solution wasn't just tacked on later. It was built right into the very fabric of faith.
So what is this safeguard? It's the human moral conscience. And think of it this way. It's not some optional software update you get later. The idea is that it's part of the factory settings, essential hardware you need just to receive and understand God's will correctly in the first place.
All right, so how does this actually work? Well, it boils down to two key things, a core principle and the tool you use to apply it. Let's call them the principle and the compass. First, you have this non-negotiable principle. It's stated right here, loud and clear. God never, ever, under any circumstances, commands something that is sinful or immoral. That is an absolute.
Now think about what that means. It acts like a fundamental rule for how you read any sacred text. If your understanding leads to something that is just morally monstrous, then by definition you've misread it. The mistake is on your end, not on God's. It's a built-in reality check.
And that brings us to the second part, the tool God gives us to use that reality check. The idea here is that every single person is born with this innate moral awareness. It's an internal compass, placed in our souls from the very beginning, that already knows the difference between right and wrong.
And this is where you see the two paths, right? On one side, you've got blind compliance. That's where you're told that questioning something on moral grounds is a sign of weak faith. You just shut up and obey. But on the other side, you have an engaged conscience. This view says that nagging feeling, that moral discomfort, is actually a vital signal from God, a warning light telling you to stop and re-examine things.
So, to really see this in action, let's dive into a story from the Quran. Section 4, Obedience with Conditions, the story of Moses.
This principle is even baked into something like a Pledge of Allegiance. And you got to pay close attention to the wording here. The pledge isn't just to obey any order. It's specifically to obey righteous orders. That one little word changes everything. It means obedience is always, always conditional on morality.
So check out this story about Moses and this wise teacher he's traveling with. When the teacher does things that seem morally wrong, like damaging a boat and risking people's lives, or killing a young boy, Moses doesn't hold back. He is horrified and he says so. But then, when the teacher does something that's just kind of weird from a business perspective, like fixing a wall for free, Moses' objection is totally different. It's about money, not morality.
And this is the key takeaway. The story doesn't scold Moses for his moral outrage. Actually, it shows his conscience was working perfectly. The lesson here isn't to just shut up and accept injustice because you don't have all the facts. It's about being humble about the wisdom you can't see, while still trusting that God-given alarm bell when you do see something wrong.
All right, let's bring it all back to that huge question we started with, but now we have this whole framework to work with. Section 5, the real failure, and misplacing the blame. You see, this completely reframes the whole problem. The real fundamental sin here isn't a lack of belief. It's taking our own very human flaws, our greed, our cruelty, our prejudice, and then trying to stamp God's name on them. It's distorting the divine nature to justify our own mess.
So when you look at it this way, the issue isn't that religion itself is dangerous. The danger comes when people are told to switch off the very tool that God gave them to navigate their faith, their own conscience. The failure is suppressing the very safeguard the religion demands you use. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question to chew on. What if our conscience isn't an obstacle we have to get over to have faith? What if it's the only compass we have to find true faith in the first place?